Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. The latest on a mass shooting in River North that killed at least 4 people. Congress passes President Trump's sweeping bill that includes major cuts to Medicaid. How Planned Parenthood could be impacted. Were you ever told to stay away from the city's south or west sides? Well, you're not alone. A new book shares stories about disrupting segregation. And while you're hitting the road this holiday weekend, have you ever wondered how highway exits are numbered? We've got the answer. First off tonight, Congress has passed President Donald Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which includes increased defense and border spending, continued tax cuts for high earners, and major cuts to Medicaid and services like Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was also at the center of a Supreme Court decision last week. The court ruled that states can deny Medicaid patients from using the organization as a provider. Joining us now with their reactions are Sarah Garza-Resnick, president and CEO of Chicago-based Personal PAC, and Matt Yonke, chief operating officer of the Pro-Life Action League based in Aurora. Thanks to both of you for joining us. So first, let's of course discuss the news of the day. That is and then we'll get to the SCOTUS ruling, but of course that's the vote that happened in the House today. Matt, Medicaid changes were made, of course, in the Big Beautiful Bill, and that would strip Planned Parenthood from receiving any Medicaid funding. Why do you think that was necessary?
Well, the American people have been pushing for this for decades. Pro-life people realize that abortion is legal in this country and that we have to be comfortable with that and accept that. But we certainly don't have to be funding it with our tax dollars to the tune of the billions of dollars we've been giving to Planned Parenthood for these many years. People have been protesting in the streets about this for years. My earliest involvement in the pro-life movement was protesting Planned Parenthood. In 2015, we had thousands and thousands of people out in nationwide protests at Planned Parenthood facilities, which was part of the impetus. It was reported in Axios for President Trump to remove their Title X funding. And so what we're seeing now is just the culmination of that effort. We're seeing the voice of the people being heard, and I'm glad to see that.
Sarah, there is speculation, and Planned Parenthood has said that this that this bill would mean closing about 1/3 of all Planned Parenthood clinics. So that's about 200 clinics, even in states where abortion is legal. What do you think the impact will be of this?
Let's be clear. What the Republican budget bill did today is disgusting and cruel. Millions of Americans are now going to be stripped of health care, including 500,000 Illinoisans. And why? To give tax cuts to the wealthiest people on this planet. It is mind-boggling that the Republican Party did not recognize how broken our healthcare system is. And instead of rolling up their sleeves and trying to make it more affordable and trying to improve our quality of care, they just decided to steal it from us.
So, Matt, what should the recourse be then for Medicaid patients who need reproductive care, but they can no longer go to Planned Parenthood? What's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is the many, many other federally qualified health centers across the country that offer these same kind of services. These federally qualified health centers outnumber Planned Parenthood centers 15-1. There are 8,800 of these federally qualified centers to 579 Planned Parenthood centers in the country. And as far as reproductive health goes, let's be clear about what Planned Parenthood brings to the table. In a year, Planned Parenthood is going to do 0% of all the mammograms in this country, 1% of the pap tests, 1% of clinical breast exams, and 1% of new STD diagnoses. And you know what else they're going to do? They're going to do 42% of all the abortions in this country. They are abortion incorporated, basically nothing else. And Americans have lots of other options to turn to, and they don't need Planned Parenthood.
Sarah, same question. What's the alternative?
Right. So I believe that people should have the freedom of choose who their doctors are and where they access health care. And I want your listeners and your viewers to know something. There is no line item in the federal budget or in a state budget that says Planned Parenthood. What we are talking about here is reimbursement for healthcare services. It's also very important to know that the cruel and draconian Hyde Amendment passed many decades ago prohibits any federal funds from being used for abortion. So I'm sorry, but Matt is just leading your leaders astray and your listeners astray. Federal funds, no taxpayer dollars go to fund abortions. People can choose where they get their health care. And federal qualified healthcare centers are not experts in sexual and reproductive health. We have every right to go to where we feel fit that our doctors can see us.
Can I address that real quick?
Sure, briefly.
That'd be great. Yeah, well, you do have the right to choose your doctor, and that's an important thing for Americans. But we just saw a New York Times expose on Planned Parenthood that described a chaotic and toxic culture. They gave multiple examples of botched care, out-of-date equipment, former employees describing the facilities as a conveyor belt where women are given wrong medications, taken to the wrong rooms. This is a mess of an organization. And they've said themselves they're going to be closing centers if they don't get this federal money. So if Abortion Incorporated is going to shutter their doors without this money, you tell me what else is happening here.
I mean, if I may, it's ludicrous. Women deserve access to health care, and we deserve the freedom to decide who and where we want that health care from. It is that plain and that simple.
Okay, so I want to move on to the SCOTUS ruling, of course, because what the Supreme Court ruled just last week was that Medicaid patients cannot sue the state to see the provider, as you mentioned, Sarah, to see the provider of their choice. In this instance, in that case, that provider was Planned Parenthood in South Carolina. Matt, sort of to Sarah's point, shouldn't Medicaid recipients have the right to hold the state liable if they believe that their freedom to choose whichever provider they want has been violated?
Well, I thought Justice Gorsuch's ruling was pretty clear about what exactly is at stake in this instance. If that right is read into the law, which is very clearly not there, he showed other examples of when Congress has written clear rights into the law. This doesn't have any kind of language like that. But if that were granted, it would lead to legal chaos for the states because they could be sued for anybody who has any kind of grudge against the state's healthcare system, and that's just untenable. So I think this is a sensible ruling.
Matt, conservatives have also been approaching this issue from different angles, and now we're seeing it happening both from the judicial and the legislative branches. What is the end goal here?
The end goal of the pro-life movement?
Well, yes, in the attack on Planned Parenthood. What would you like to see?
Yeah, sure. On Planned Parenthood particularly. Well, I'd like to see Planned Parenthood shutter their doors. This is an organization that's been implicated multiple times in not following their duty as mandatory reporters and covering up sex crimes with abortion. They've been funneled millions and millions of dollars over these last several decades when they've been the poster child of the liberal establishment. And, they've been on the wane for these last few years. The New York Times is now at their heels. I think their days are numbered. It looks to me like they know it too. And, I won't shed a tear if we see the end of them.
Sarah?
Listen, this is simple. This is about healthcare. This is about us being treated like human beings and getting to decide where we get our healthcare from. This country has over 35% of counties have healthcare deserts. We do not have places to get healthcare. Maternity wards are shuttering. People cannot get access to life-saving essential healthcare. And Planned Parenthood is a healthcare provider. Matt is talking about politics. I'm not here to talk about politics in this regard. I'm talking about our health and our safety and the freedom to choose where we go to go see a doctor.
Sarah, we've already seen an increase in out-of-state abortions in Illinois since the Dobbs decision, of course, which overturned Roe versus Wade 3 years ago. Could we see more of this as a result of both this ruling and the legislation?
Yes, the cruel abortion bans and the criminalization of pregnancy that is sweeping our country is causing a healthcare crisis. And Illinois is at the epicenter of that. We have worked for decades to ensure that women have access to the reproductive health care they need. We have a robust network of independent clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics, and hospital-based care. And 2/3 of the people who received care in Illinois last year were Illinoisans. They were our neighbors and our colleagues and our friends. About 1/3 of them were people who had to leave their home, leave their jobs, leave their children, leave their loved ones to come get access to health care here. I know Illinois is ready for this challenge, and whatever these draconian, barbaric laws that are being passed by the Republican Congress and Donald Trump, we are ready to meet the challenge.
Okay. A debate that is long running in the United States. Not going to get to the bottom of it tonight, but I thank the both of you for joining us. Matt Yonke and Sarah Garza-Resnick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, what we know about a mass shooting in River North. Matt Masterson joins us with the details next.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
At least 4 people were killed and 14 injured in a late-night shooting in River North. Now there are calls to shut down a newly opened restaurant near where the incident occurred. The mass shooting comes ahead of the July 4th weekend.
During this weekend, on the 4th of July, every single year, people gather. They get together. We have to do this responsibly.
And reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. Matt, take us through what happened.
So the shooting occurred around 11 o'clock last night on West Chicago Avenue downtown. A large group was exiting from a album release party for Chicago rapper Mellow Bucks in that area when a dark-colored vehicle pulled up, and police said somebody or multiple people inside that vehicle opened fire. 18 people were struck. 4 of those people were killed. The victims ranged in age from 24 to 27. It was 2 men and 2 women who were killed. The vehicle then fled, and nobody was currently in custody. Some of the other victims were left in critical condition, but the police are still searching for the shooters in this.
Okay, so the event, as you said, was being held at a restaurant called Artis, which recently opened in April. Artis made a statement this morning on their Instagram page. It reads, quote, "Last night, an act of violence occurred within the vicinity of our restaurant, and it shook us deeply. Artis was created as a safe space, a space where Black, brown, queer, and allied communities could gather, be celebrated, and feel at home in River North. We've always led with that mission, and what happened last night disrupted it in the most painful way. Our hearts are with the victims and their loved ones." Our viewers can see the rest of that statement on our website. But Matt, 42nd Ward Alderman Brendan Riley now calling on the city to revoke their business license, permanently shut that space down. Why is he asking for that?
So Artis was previously known as the Hush Lounge in the same location there, but back in November of 2022, there was a separate mass shooting there. 4 people were shot and 1 person was killed. When that happened, Hush shut down a short time later after similar calls from Alderman Riley and other city officials. Riley again now is seeking to have this location shut down. He's saying that the owners of this new restaurant, which they portrayed themselves as a BYOB restaurant, not a club or anything like that, they said that those owners were dishonest with the city when they were petitioning to open this spot, and that they should now have their licenses pulled and they should be shut down permanently. Now, the location Artis is already temporarily shut down. After the shooting, the city ordered a summary closure notice. It's a temporary measure as this investigation goes on. The police are still investigating that location, obviously following the shooting, but Riley is seeking a permanent closure of this spot once again.
And of course, this comes just ahead of the July 4th holiday weekend. What are the city's safety plans for the weekend?
So the city is always plans extensively for the historically violent 4th of July weekend. Last year, over 100 people were shot in the city. The plans this year, they weren't affected by this mass shooting or a separate mass shooting that happened early Thursday morning that left several people injured on the far south side. The city always plans to put extra resources in the places that people go, the beaches, the parks, the lakefront, and the downtown business district near where the shooting occurred. That's all going to take place as it typically does. There will also be extra officers spread throughout the city. City officials are also planning to extend the hours that community violence interrupters are working over the overnight hours till around 3 a.m., trying to get in front of these actions so that they can help stop any of these shootings or violence before they even occur.
Okay, a lot of work lying ahead, of course, for the ZPD. Matt Masterson, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Matt's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And we're back with more right after this. Have you been told to stay away from the south or west sides of Chicago? That was the question posed to local residents, and responses poured in about times they were told, don't go. Those stories are now compiled in a new book called Don't Go: Stories of Segregation and How to Disrupt It, to better understand what can happen when people explore the ignored parts of the city. Joining us now are the book's co-authors, artist, photographer Tanika Lewis-Johnson, and sociologist Maria Kreisen. Thanks to you both for joining us. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you.
So this book starts with your own personal stories of growing up and then how you came together to write this book. How does your story reflect the experiences of the people that you included? Maria Kreisen, I'll start with you.
So not very much. I think that's part of the interesting part of the story between Tanika and I is we had extremely different upbringings. I grew up in a small town in South Dakota where there were 3 black people. So we did not have the kinds of issues of segregation. It was a small town. So my upbringing was very different than Tanika's, and that's kind of part of the point of the inclusion of these stories, is that 2 people with very different backgrounds but having very similar other experiences. We both loved to read. We both had family with artists in them. You know, we had lots of similarities, and yet we were both nerds. Okay, you were going to say it? All right, you say it.
You said it, not me. Tanika, same question to you. How do you think it's important, or why do you think it's important to include your own stories in this story?
Well, one, I wanted people who read this book to understand that this is what segregation prevents you from being able to do. It keeps you from people that you have a shared passion with, that you have a common interest with. And when you come together, you can create a book like Don't Go. And so it was really important for people to understand that even though Maria and I have very different backgrounds, we have a shared passion and interest to help educate people on how to disrupt segregation. And this was our way of demonstrating that. And so it's an example of what can happen when you disrupt segregation.
When you asked people to share their Don't Go stories, of course you received a lot of responses. Maria, what did that tell you?
That Tanika, once again, had really struck a chord. I tell people I'm a sociologist, and I, for years, have tried to get people to talk to me to do surveys and interviews and focus groups, and I have to bribe them and cajole them and persuade them to do it. And so when I opened the inbox that showed all of the responses that Tanika had generated just by mentioning it on social media, I was like, okay, well, this is a lot easier than anything I've ever done. And it was, the stories were amazing.
It speaks to her following as well. Tanika, what's wrong with the don't go narrative when people hear, oh, don't go into that neighborhood? What's wrong with that?
Well, one, especially when you're in a segregated city like Chicago, and people say don't go to the south side of Chicago, and the south side of Chicago is majority black because of our history of redlining. And when people say that, it shows that they're not educated on how that came to be and how it perpetuates segregation. So it's just a common rumor, and businesses know that, people who are interested in buying homes know that. So you're literally stifling black neighborhoods by just saying something just so common like don't go to the south side, because it really does prevent investment.
It's also offensive to the thousands and thousands of people who call those neighborhoods home.
Personally offensive, and that's the other part that I think we really wanted to show with this book is the personal part of segregation. It's not just that it prevents economic investment, it hurts people's feelings, and it helps people live in fear. And we wanted to offer an opportunity for people to understand how to disrupt that and how to not be offensive to people.
Maria, what are some of the themes that emerged from these stories?
Oh, so many themes.
I know.
Which
Fear.
themes do we pick? I mean, fear was the predominant theme, and it was fear of being shot and killed. You know, that's what we heard from many white people that we talked to, who talked about the message that they were received either growing up from their parents or families or police officers sometimes, or coworkers or colleagues or college student friends, things like that. Everyone is instilling this fear. So that was really, that's kind of the motif that goes through all of it. It's also fear of being embarrassed to talk about these kind of things. And I think that's part of why we really wanted to do this book, is to show people you can confront these fears. The thoughts and fears that you have are shared by others, and people could see themselves in the book and say, oh, now I see they overcame their fears and did something
And
different.
once they conquer that fear, and maybe they do go to visit a neighborhood on the south or the west side, what do they learn?
Oh, that's the beautiful part that I love about the book, is that this book in particular, since we have stories of white Chicagoans, black Chicagoans, Latino Chicagoans, it really does help people understand how segregation impacts all of us. And the fear that we're talking about, you know, a lot of white Chicagoans are expressing the vulnerability of admitting that they have been taught to be raised in that fear. And so one of the revelations that they have is, oh, it's not what I've been taught, and it is actually racist. And then also we have people who are from neighborhoods that people are told to not go to, like Tiana, and her story is very much like mine. She had to learn that that's what people thought of her neighborhood, and that was eye-opening for her.
Why is this kind of storytelling important? How does storytelling help disrupt segregation?
I think that as a sociologist who spent her career crunching numbers, analyzing texts, and reducing them to reports that academics and policymakers read, I think the stories touch us in a way that Tanika always talks about. Until we make segregation personal, we're never going to break it down. And I think what better way than through stories to help people see really what's going on, the impact of the messaging. I just think stories are relatable.
And it seems to me, Tanika, it also is sort of people taking it into their own hands rather than waiting on government to fix segregation.
Oh, yes, because clearly politics and policies haven't gotten us to where we want to be. And I personally believe is because we forget that it's personal. Racism is rooted in people to people, and it's really personal. And that's the part that we want to elevate and bring back, that you can disrupt these large systemic issues by, you know, changing behaviors, your personal behaviors, or just thinking about the history of all of these issues. And it really is how you treat people. It just comes down to that.
All right, lessons to be learned. Sounds like a good book to get our hands on.
Yes.
That is where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Tanika Lewis Johnson and Maria Kriesen for joining us. Thanks.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on the book.
Thanks.
Again, the book is called Don't Go: Stories of Segregation and How to Disrupt It. Holiday weekend is just about here, and for many that means hitting the road to get out of town. While you're driving though, did you ever wonder how all the numbers on the interstate work? Well, wonder no more. Nick Blumberg steers us to the answer in our WTTW News Explained series.
When you're cruising along one of Chicagoland's highways, what's on your mind? What song to play next? Where the nearest burger place is? When all this construction will be finished? Do you ever find yourself wondering how all the exits got their numbers? It's relatively simple, but not necessarily intuitive. For interstates in Illinois that run north-south, like I-55, the numbering system starts at the southernmost point the highway enters Illinois. For interstates running east-west, like I-80, the numbers start at the westernmost point. A lot of times, the very first turnoff is exit 1, but the next one isn't necessarily going to be exit 2. That's because the numbers correspond not to how many exits there are, but to how many miles away from the border they are. So by following the exit sign numbers, you can actually track how far you are from the state's boundary line. Sometimes things get a little tricky. Where two interstates merge, the numbering system for one supersedes the other. For example, if you're heading downtown along I-90 where it meets I-94, the exit numbers jump from 84 down to 44. Which brings us to one more wrinkle in the system. Around the city, I-90, that's the Skyway, Dan Ryan, Kennedy, and Jane Addams, and I-94, or the Kingery, Bishop Ford, Dan Ryan, Kennedy, Edens, and the Tri-State Tollway, mostly run north and south. But the signs all say east and west. What gives? Well, don't forget about the inter part of interstates. Our highways are part of a nationwide system, and 90 and 94 broadly run east-west across the country. They've just got to curve around pesky old Lake Michigan to carry on their merry way, so they move north-south through the Windy City. So the next time you find yourself stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, you may not know how long you'll be sitting there, but at least you'll know how far your bumper is from the border.
Learn something new every day. You can see more from our Emmy Award-winning series, WTTW News Explains, on our website. And that's our show for this Thursday night. Stay connected with our newsroom by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. We're off tomorrow for the holiday, but we will see you back here on Monday. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and enjoy your holiday weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that contributes to public safety policy and guidelines.